Hey, good evening, and welcome to everyone here in person and online. It's so special to be here with you all tonight. It's actually my third day at the Computer History Museum. I am the new, thank you. Yeah. I am the new CEO and president, and even though it's my third day, it's actually my second time on this stage. In 2018, I was the general manager of Discovery Science Channel, and we had Steve Wozniak, and we had a documentary called Silicon Valley, The Untold Story, and I got to introduce Steve Wozniak in a great panel. And so I'm just really excited to be back here and to be doing more and more events like tonight. Tonight we continue Computer History Museum's more than 3-year-long Tech and the Future of News initiative, connecting practitioners, spreading best practices, and educating the public. Our program focuses on making news with data, exploring tech's impact on journalism from AI to data journalism. Here at CHM, our mission is to decode technology, its computing past, digital presence, and future impact on humanity. Obviously, the story of tech and journalism is profoundly central to this mission. As part of our program, we'd like to invite you all to participate in live audience polls, submit questions for the speakers, and share event feedback using Slido, an audience engagement tool. No need to download an app, just scan this QR code on the screen to load the web page. If you scan it now, you'll have it handy, and you can vote in polls when prompted. And when inspiration, bless you, when inspiration strikes, hit the Q&A tab, and you can submit your questions and upvote other questions. So now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, David Yarnell, a Pulitzer Prize-winning former executive editor of the San Jose Mercury News and a trustee of CHM. David is the author and primary photographer of the 2024 book, The Geography of Hope, Real-Life Stories of Optimists Mapping a Brighter Future. Previously, he was the CEO of the National Audubon Society and executive director of the Environmental Defense Fund. And congratulations are in order for David, who just started as interim CEO at American Leadership Forum, Silicon Valley. So please join me in welcoming David Yarnell back to the CHM live stage.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks,
and welcome.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for coming to the Computer History Museum. So I'm going to tell you about the panelists, and then we're going to get right to this. Jason Koebler is the co-founder of 404 Media, which just a year after its launch won the Electronic Frontier Foundation's 2024 award for fearless journalism. Jason is the #2 most cited reporter on TechMeme's leaderboard of the most influential and prolific writers in technology. He was previously editor-in-chief of Vice's Motherboard and was an executive producer on Netflix's Encounters. Marian Chia-Ming Liu is a projects editor at the Washington Post focused on strategic initiatives like Lead Lab, the Post's storytelling R&D team. A Pulitzer Prize-winning multimedia journalist, she previously was with CNN, the Seattle Times, and the San Jose Mercury News, and she serves as vice president of civic engagement for the Asian American Journalists Association. Alex Reed is project manager and lead data analyst for Mapping Black California, and provides support as a data researcher and visualizer for its many initiatives. She works at the intersection of data and storytelling and as a data activist. Alex has been able to address issues that range from disparities in health and education to social justice and civil rights, battles for a variety of institutions. The Andy Warhol Museum, the Carnegie Mellon University, and World Stage Incorporated, to name just a few. Won't you please join me in welcoming our panelists? Hello.
Hello.
You all gonna take home your reporter's notebooks? Aren't those still like the coolest things? Those are great. So let's start with a lightning round. When I say computing and news, what do you think of? Alex?
Oh, no, we started down here. I'm going to use my same answer. I said earlier, a void from both ends, and I wanted to amend that a little bit to say an opportunity from both ends, right? Computing the internet is an opportunity for a voice, a broader voice for reach, but only with the right sort of education, the right sort of approach, and the right sort of identification of your audience. And that's from sort of the local news side. And on the other side of that opportunity, as a data analyst and as a researcher, it's an opportunity to spread more stories, to spread more information, but same deal, with the right audience in mind, the right educational standpoint in mind, and with the right goal, hopefully a good one.
Well, thanks for that. Marian.
I think of that meme with the dog and everything else is on fire. It says, "This is fine." I think that it brings democratization of news, but also brings up, how are we going to do our business model? How are we valuing everything? So when there is, but when there's risk, there's also opportunity as well.
Awesome. Jason.
I got into journalism because I thought, I don't want to be in an office all day, and I don't want to look at a computer all day. And so for the last 15 years, I've stared at a computer all day, naturally. But I love what I do, and I think what I've learned is that obviously there's very little differentiating the real world from the internet. And the things that happen on the internet and happen on the computer impact the real world in a very important way that we're seeing constantly. And so I now use the computer to dive into really specific communities, to go into really weird discords and forums and find people where they're at, where they're talking about the thing that they're passionate about, where they're organizing with each other to form a better world, or where they're organizing with each other to hack 4chan, for example. So I think at this point you can't separate computers and journalism.
You said that you told me in an interview last week that you were in 100 different Discord rooms, and I just immediately visualized Severance in some blank hallway and just some really weird space.
Yeah, I mean, I have my different windows and screens where things happen. So it's if I feel like diving into a community of people who are and I use the word community lightly, I guess, but a community of people who are making AI spam for Instagram, I'll just open up that Discord window and scroll for a while and say oh, this is how they're making money today. They're making videos of LeBron James and Steph Curry hugging each other and fighting a gorilla or whatever.
That is just amazing.
Yeah, and then I'll click to another one if I want another world.
That is just crazy. So I have something for you. I have a different question for you. This is the Slido poll. So if you go to slido.com, come on, let's play. What word comes to mind when you think of the impacts of AI on the news? So these are the words that you're thinking of. Scary, that's interesting. Scary's clearly in the lead. Nobody said makes my life lots better.
Efficiency
Laziness
is
is
over
funny.
there.
There's you on there.
Finally.
All right. Well, I think we have a general sense of the room. You can continue to play with that for a minute or two. So, Jason, 404 focuses on technology news, and you actually have to be able to use all those technologies in order to understand what folks are doing. What kinds of stories come to mind when you think about some of your best work at 404?
Yeah, so I've become really obsessed with AI over the last 18 months, which is very broad, obviously, but I've become specifically interested in how AI is leading to a collapse of discoverability on the internet. And what I mean by that is it has become so easy to make a lot of spam, but also pretty effective spam. And so I don't know if many of you have logged on to Facebook recently, but I realized one day that I was logged on to Facebook and I was seeing all of these really bizarre images of like fantastical log cabins, sure, but then also like images of Jesus as a shrimp, for example, where it was like Jesus, but his arms were made out of shrimp. And these images had thousands, actually they had millions of likes. They had hundreds of thousands of comments. And I was just very obsessed with the idea of like, where is this coming from? How is it being monetized? And what is it doing to us as like a publication who is trying to reach people on the internet using these same platforms, sort of being crowded out by this spam? But then also as people who are trying to find news on the internet, you log on to Facebook and you're just...
So is this the dead internet, or is it something else?
Well, so it's a mix of all of that because it's a mix of real people liking things. It's a mix of spammers who've gotten really good at gaming Facebook's algorithms and people who are using like hacked accounts to give it a boost in the algorithm by liking and commenting and things like that. And then it's a mix of people who have literally died and had their accounts taken over to engage with this sort of content. And the effect of it is that real people, human beings, are seeing this stuff on their feeds, and it's kind of like crowding out journalists, it's crowding out your friends and family. Like if you log on to Facebook and Instagram, like you very rarely see things that your friends and family post. You often see things that are designed to provoke a response. And so I call it the zombie internet because it's like a mix of bots, dead accounts, real people, people who once lived, now are dead, have been taken over. Like it's a mess. It's a big mess.
How big is it? How big is that zombie internet?
I mean, I think it's huge because I see these really weird things on Instagram and Facebook that have millions and millions and millions of likes. And there's an entire content industry of people who are creating these things and posting them and making tens of thousands of dollars a month. There's entire communities of YouTubers who are teaching people how to do this, how to leverage the recent wildfires in Los Angeles to make news reports about what's going on where the Hollywood sign is on fire, even though that never happened. I've seen Israel and Palestine content like designed to take advantage of that horrible situation. And so it's really big. It's like any major news event has an entire parallel ecosystem of AI-generated content trying to take advantage of that ecosystem for clicks, likes, shares, ad revenue.
That is just amazing to me, and its size is what blows me away. 404 does a lot of pretty serious investigative stuff. One project you did was around pictures of kids, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I used to work at Vice, big media company. I left Vice about 18 months ago, and we started 404 Media. We're the journalists, but we're also the founders and owners of this small business. And so we're very interested in making sure people can find our content and subscribe to us and make sure that we have our own jobs. So we're both journalists and business people. And we were working on the story about the inclusion of child sexual abuse material in a very popular open source large language model. And this was a really difficult story for us to report because it dealt with horrific illegal content that we couldn't legally see and we didn't want to see, but we needed to confirm that it was in there. So we were talking to researchers, we were talking to lawyers, we spent a lot of time making sure that we were able to do this story in an ethical, legal way. And we published this story. It was quite well received, but within 5 minutes of us publishing it, dozens of AI content farms had scraped what we had done, run it through what's called an article spinner, where every third or fourth word is changed, and published it. And so there were like 50 ripoffs of our article that were published within a few minutes of us publishing it. And these articles are ranking above ours on Google search, on Google News. And this was the result of 8 months of our labor, and it was ripped off within seconds. And so that was like a really eye-opening experience for us to sort of realize, like, we're not just competing with other journalists, but we're competing with people all over the world who couldn't care less about any sort of ethical framework, who are just trying to rip off our stuff and make some money. And it's been very interesting to sort of like dive into that world, because it's happening to everything that exists on the internet.
Well, and all of that just makes me, and I'm sure other people, appreciate your ethical standards even more, and your business model, which is that you ask people to subscribe to the work that you do. So congratulations on your success. We'll come back to some of those stories. Marian, when you talk about technology and news, everything starts for you with audience, which is not always a word that journalists use, and not an approach that journalists always take. But you do. Can you talk a little bit about that orientation and about some of the sections and projects that you've worked on?
Well, it's important you need to tailor whatever you're doing to your audience, to your readership, because even if you ask the question, how are you, you're going to answer differently to like your mom, your friend, your colleague. So you need to tailor the conversation, tailor the story. So for example, and you also need to be on the platform they use, because I would call it like a field of dreams problem. Because just because you build it, people won't necessarily come, because how would they know you built it? So it's important for you to be where they are, to meet them where they are. So for example, on our January 6th project, we published that almost a year after it happened. We want to be the documenting, final say of what happened. So we wrote about, the red flags that led to it, what went down that day, and then the repercussions. But it was being almost a year after, I was worried about, well, how people find us. So I took the top 50 stories that we wrote about January 6th, and I looked at where do they find those stories, and looking at where the traffic was driven from. And not surprisingly, it was not search, because we were in a year of the pandemic and also killer bees. So it's hard to know what happened that year. So as a result, realized we have to be on all the platforms. We have to meet people where they are. And so we are on events, we are on Facebook, we are on alerts, we are on Instagram, we are on newsletters, we're on the site, we're in print, and we're also on TikTok. And we did TikTok 3 different ways. So we did, the straightforward, here photos of what happened before, went down that day and afterwards. But also people get news in different ways, like audio. A lot of people listen to podcasts. Like that's where I get my news. So we just had one TikTok just showed a desktop phone, and you literally heard people call in and make threats, and that raw, visceral language. And then the last one, because TikTok's a fun medium with dad humor, we had our TikTok guy sit there and pretending to be the old guy, and we had the intern come and ask him, do you remember what happened that day? And he was like, no. And all the caption said was, to find out, look at this link. So it's all about how do people consume this, and to tailor it to that, instead of like, well, we know what's best, we'll feed it to you.
So for those of you who know newsrooms or don't, it's probably a fair statement to say that newspapers have not always been audience driven. They are mostly run by people who believe that their job is to tell you what you should know in their view. And that is changing significantly, and Marian, you certainly represent that. You were instrumental in remaking a flagship section from the Washington Post.
Style.
The style section of the Washington Post, created by Ben Bradley. Talk a little bit about that if you can, please.
I don't know if any of you watched the movie The Post with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks played the Ben Bradley character. And style comes from him saying, I want to cover people with style, people with flair. So it doesn't necessarily mean fashion, it means covering culture. But we want to, instead of just like, oh, we're going to literally copy and paste, from the print to online, because there was no online footprint, we looked at, well, what do readers really want? And do they even know what this is? So we tested it, like, do you know what style is? People obviously were like, oh, is it fashion? We're like, no. Okay, now we need to explain it. Let's make a tagline. But then the tagline needs to be understandable, so let's test all the taglines. And then we tested, the colors. We had so many meetings about pink. lots of pink. It was a year of Barbie. And then like, but what shade of pink? What does that represent? And then we took like a mood board and we took, all these pieces and we matched up team, our staffers with potential readers, and then they created the section together. And then we took that and we created our final section. And not only that, but we imagined that, well, we want to get younger, readers. Let's go on Instagram. Let's go on newsletter. And also let's re-envision style in real life. Let's have events where reporters are interviewing people like Christopher Nolan. But also let's have a curated audience. Let's represent, readers that we really want. So instead of just, finding anybody, I wanted, younger, people of color. So went into the universities and not the big ones like Georgetown. We went to the high schools, we went to the film clubs, we went to the junior colleges, and then I even looked at the professors and their makeup and like, let's look at the minority professors and make sure they invite students, and let's create this ideal audience of what we want and have them represented. And then on top of that, to give out like little programs, we had a zine. So it was almost like a comic version of the style and then some stories so they could see what style is like.
It's really an interesting and very different approach. I want to turn to Alex in 1 second, but I want to invite your questions. Mark gave you the details about how to submit those, so I'd like to invite those because I want to turn to those in a bit as well. So Alex, you have your organization has a different take on audience, and can you talk a little bit about that and the work that you do?
Sure, I'd love to. So Mapping Black California, the way that we approach audience is from both a journalistic storytelling aspect and then also the very, very important data accessibility aspect. We are a GIS-led, a GIS-centered organization, and so the majority of the work that we do is centered around using these tools to build maps and data visualizations, which also include like dashboards, interactives, those kind of things that can bring people's real life stories, their experiences into a sort of like a visual language, right? And so when we're building these sort of visualizations, we have to focus on who is getting the best use out of them, right? And we may have, for different maps like this one, our food deserts map, we may have community constituents, policymakers, or policy advocates rather, who are looking for information about the communities that they need to be targeting, right? They want to bring investment into their community. With this map talking about food deserts, we are looking at disparity in who is eating where. In the red areas, we've got the majority of the populations living below the poverty line. In the blue areas, the majority of populations living over the poverty line. And if you look at it, most of the people who are poor have food pantries, bars, convenience stores. Most of the people who we would consider, of average wealth or above, that's where the grocery stores are. And so when we're talking about investment in these regions, policy advocates, nonprofits, community leaders, they need this kind of information in an easy to digest, easy to translate way so that they can take to their leaders, their elected leaders or local officials.
So let me just interject, GIS, Geographic Information Systems?
Geographic Information Systems.
Which is basically plotting using geography.
Yes. I always forget to define for people, my apologies, I'm more on the data side. So what we do is we take spatial data, so that's data about the world, about territory, about land. We put that in a visual way, and then we pair that with data about people, data about their lives, information that can be both quantitative and qualitative. And it lends us to building all these different kind of tools. So what we just saw with food deserts was places and spaces and things. And then we have a tool like this, which is more for journalists, right? Is more for the policy makers themselves, and is also a watchdog for the community. So this has all three levels of audience. This tool has a map that is not necessarily the focus of the dashboard. It's included in there as a navigation tool, but we're still utilizing data, and in this case, Web3, the big future, to bring to people the information about what their governments are doing for them or what they have promised to do for them. And then this gives people the information that they need to go back to their leaders, their elected leaders and their appointed leaders and say, you made these promises, I need you to follow through with them. So with combating racism as a public health crisis, we have indexes that talk about the state of the communities that they're in, the municipalities. And we have stories that our journalists, our local nonprofits have published around those topics. And we've paired them with these web archives of documents that these municipalities have put out that we've said we can prove utilizing the blockchain, their provenance, we can say this is what they said they would do for you. It's been 5 years. Have they done it? And if not, here's all the proof you need. And then lastly, we just have our human audience. I think we're missing a little text on, oh, it's black, it's probably in black. We have our regular human audience, we have the story, the full storytelling aspect of it, the best part of the job. And it's where we get to just be creative. We get to tell the anecdotal, the narrative lives of the people in the communities that we live in. We're local to Riverside, California. Moreno Valley was just outpaced, but it was, when we did this story, the blackest city in the Inland Empire. And what we did was we went around Moreno Valley and we got interviews, video interviews of people who were living there, of the community constituents, and we talked about their lives. They were able to tell us what it was like to emigrate into Moreno Valley, to be born in there, to be raised up in that city. And we were able to plot and plan for the Civil Rights Institute down there what it was like in a spatialized way to actually be in that city and watch it change and grow over time.
So, this is a classic journalism value, giving voice to the unheard. Is it your experience that when you visualize data like that, that people have aha moments?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of the things that's really so great about the tool is because there are so many different ways for us to take what can be very sterile information in a lot of ways. It can be a percentage point, it can be a margin of error. We can take it and translate it into a way that really allows somebody to see their lived experience reflected, especially when we're doing more granular work like the food deserts, like Moreno Valley. When people see themselves, their parents, their cousins, their schoolmates reflected in our work and in our stories, they feel directly connected to the progress or lack thereof that is being made in their communities. And that's the point of us as an organization, is to say we are more than just numbers in a table in a database that you pull out when you want to convince someone to give you funding.
And it's so terrific that people see themselves represented, right? And that's a pretty cool use of technology. So another sort of core journalism value is shining a light on bad actors. And Jason, we were talking about how sometimes you guys jokingly refer to, say that you're like white hat hackers when you're reporting on some stories. And I remember the story about GeoSpy, and maybe you could tell that and any others that fit that category.
Yeah, so GeoSpy is a company that uses AI to geolocate an image. And if you're familiar with the the game GeoGuessr, or that guy Rainbolt, he goes viral all the time, where he'll take a photo of like a street, not a street sign because then you know where it is, but like a dirt road somewhere, and he'll be able to pinpoint it anywhere on the world. And you say, how could he have possibly done this? Well, GeoSpy is this tool that does that with AI. And so my colleagues and I decided to be guinea pigs, and I gave him a bunch of photos of myself on vacation, around town, around my house, and he ran it through this tool and was able to, locate where I was within often just like a few streets, like very, very close to anywhere in the world. And this is a really powerful tool. It can be used for good. Like, it can be used by journalists to, for example, find out where a war crime is happening, or find out where some sort of crime or malfeasance is occurring. This is something that people do using their ingenuity all the time. They just try to find clues in a photo and try to geolocate it. Well, this tool does it automatically, but it has all these implications for stalkers, for hackers, for people who might want to use it for really nefarious purposes. And you could just log into this tool and geolocate people immediately. Like, there was no wall, really. And so we did this story, and we sort of spoke to some privacy experts about it. And GeoSpy, when locked it down, you sort of have to apply for membership to use it now. And that's just one example. Like, we try to in our work, think about who are the affected populations. Like, anytime a new AI image generator launches, we'll kind of probe the edges of it to see if it will say, for example, generate images of Taylor Swift. And if it will still generate images of Taylor Swift, that means that that company probably hasn't thought very much about how its technology is being used, because this is the most famous celebrity in the world. It's someone who has a lot of, frankly, like non-consensual porn, AI porn made of her. And so if a company isn't thinking about even that, that's a signal that there's probably a lot of holes in this technology. And often writing about them will cause a company to close those holes and make their product a bit more secure.
There is a white hat hacker kind of feel to that.
I mean, I think so, and we really try to experiment and use the technology as much as possible. None of us are data analysts. Like, we're not
are you
like
guys like guinea pigs for each other?
Oh, we're absolutely guinea pigs for each other. Anytime like any new technology drops, Joseph, my colleague, will often say like, okay, who am I like looking up this time to see if we're in a database or see if a surveillance tool can be used, if we can use a surveillance tool to spy on ourselves. That's usually a signal that someone can use that tool to spy on anyone. And so we try to see like what the guardrails are for a lot of these technologies. And often it's like an oversight from the companies. Like there's such an ethos now of just kind of like launching something because you want to win the competition, you want to be first to market. And so they're often not thinking about the negative externalities of what can, what this tool can be used for, what any given tool can be used for. And I think we sort of see it as our role to not be the fun police, but to say like, hey, this company hasn't thought through how this technology is actually going to be used in the real world. It's like when Sam Altman sits on stage and says, here's the latest and greatest version of GPT, he's not highlighting the fact that people are going to then use that tool to spam the internet, to make all sorts, any awful thing that you can imagine. People are going to try to use that tool for that, and people are using that tool for that. And so we try to focus on what people are actually using these technological innovations for, because often it's not the stuff that shows up in a marketing slide.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So, Marian, Alex showed us some really powerful examples about how she and her team uses technology in journalism to help underseen audiences. And young people are also an underseen audience for lots of media.
Yes.
Do you agree? And how is the Post working on that?
Of course I agree, because you need new readers, so you need to replenish. So yeah, I think it's really important to reach them, but again, it's important to meet them where they are instead of having them come to us. I think only the truly news nerds are going to go to your landing page, so you need to go. But you also need to know how a lot of these social platforms work, that they don't really let people come out. They don't encourage people to link out. So you need to know what their purpose is. It's probably more branding than anything, so they're aware. So then people are aware of us on the TikTok, and then we'll be future readers. So it's not necessarily like a conversion driver, but it's awareness. It's the top of the funnel to get them through.
So that is a change in journalism for sure. I have another question about AI, and that is whether, and this, Alex, for you and for Marian in particular, do you feel pressure to use AI tools? I mean, do you think that the world of journalism is like caught up the way the rest of the world is? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel pressured to build AI tools, and my program experience is entirely on the fly, right? So use them, yes, entirely, because efficiency is like the name of the game. When the internet was introduced, news, like local media and news and journalism became about like getting your papers online. Everybody thought that, oh, that was how people are going to be accessing the news, and they were right about that, but that was not like the approach to getting audiences the best information, right? And so now that AI is this tool that can be used to like inundate people with information, all these conversations are about, okay, well, how can we be on the forefront of AI? If we don't lose it, we're going to get left behind by it. If we don't build a tool, we're going to get left behind by the money you can make off of building a tool. And so sort of being on both sides of that conversation, it's trying to figure out how can you integrate AI into your business from an efficiency standpoint, from a data privacy and protection standpoint, because when we're talking about like people being able to be located using AI tools, we're working with a smaller Black population in California. And it's already hard enough dealing with data suppression and race disaggregation. Imagine if we were to publish something on a community of 10,000 and it's 2% Black, right? You could find those people very easily using AI. So integrating those tools into the business, you have to approach it from a different angle. And then being a technology company, trying to utilize a data set as large as ours and as large as the ones that we have access to, we want to be something that people can look to as kind of future-proof, right? They can always turn to us for information, for trusted information. And AI is becoming a tool that you can use for information. Trust is the problem then. Trust is not necessarily inherently built into that.
And Marian, what do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, like the word that came up for everybody was scary, but it's also exciting to try the latest toy. So I'm a part of the Asian American Journal Association, and we are trying to figure out I co-lead a watchdog group, so when something racist happens, we kind of go forward and we try to write to that media organization. For example, when New York Post said that the Trump shooter was Chinese, not Chinese. So many Asian organizations banded together and made sure that it was changed and there was also a correction. But every time something happens, we've been doing it from scratch. So you have like all this effort and it's not necessarily consistent. So I was asking another journalism group, like, how do you do this? Is there somebody that can advise us in the process so we can look at almost like a flow chart? When this happens, we do this. When this happens, we do this. And have like a template of letters to work from so we are not recreating things and also we can be consistent. And I was surprised that that other journalism group suggested, well, why don't you put it into AI? Why don't you put it into ChatGPT and then create a framework? So we did, and we're trying that out now. We put all our past releases in, and from there, we're creating a framework. But I think that's when the human comes in, and you make sure that you're not just copying, pasting, you're putting a human element, because every scenario will be different, but you also want that framework to be consistent. So if a naysayer comes like, but you did this when this, we can actually point to this and be like, no, this is based on 2 years worth of work, and this is what we did.
I think on the word cloud earlier, there was scary, but there was also cautious, and there was also careless. And I think I use AI, but I use it in ways that are integrated into programs that I've used for a long time. So I'll use Google Translate a lot. Like I've done it, like if you go on YouTube now, you can translate from any language into English. So for one of the stories about these AI spammers, there was an entire community of people in India who were teaching each other how to do it. It was like a hustle bro side culture, or side hustle, like community of people being like, here's how you can make AI images that will go viral in the United States. And all of those videos were in Hindi. And I don't speak Hindi, but I was able to watch these videos and get the gist of them. And then we went to a human translator to make sure that the translations were accurate, to reach out for comment, to interview them. And so Google Translator, sort of the built-in AI tool that was in YouTube, was very helpful for doing some of the initial information gathering for that reporting. And then we made very sure to use like real humans to do the actual translation work because of that caution aspect. I think that the news business has such a credibility crisis, and people see AI written articles or AI. If you make a misstep with AI, if you're using it and it's public facing and you make a mistake because of AI, you'll lose your credibility very fast, or at least we will, because I think our audience has sort of a, in my opinion, correct, but like knee-jerk revulsion to generative AI in particular. And so I think that a lot of news outlets that are diving headfirst into it, that are saying, we're going to have an AI bot argue with our columnist beneath the article, like the LA Times is doing right now, are really losing a lot of credibility that they've spent a lot of time earning because these AI tools are making mistakes. And humans make mistakes, but when an AI makes a mistake and you publish it, it looks very careless. Whereas like if a human being makes that mistake, you can kind of own it. You can say like, here's what happened. Whereas with when an AI makes a mistake, the AI makes a mistake, but you might not have any idea why it made that mistake. And so I think there's a long way to go before I would personally feel comfortable having like AI content that's public facing. And I think what you were describing where you're using AI in the process of this, but then there's that human layer that's making sure everything is correct and that you're sort of like confident with what you're putting out there is very important.
Also, I think it's very careful what information you're feeding it, because I mean, it can be really fun. Like you can make your image and look like a Ghibli cartoon, like anime, they had that come out. And most recently, you can make yourself look like a Barbie figure, but where are your images going to? And is that going to feed, like, now you see influencers that are AI, you see models that are AI, so then they might underutilize people of color as models, or people of color that are influencers. So you just want to be very wary of where your information goes.
And I think it's very important, just very quickly, I think it's very important to note as well, AI is making mistakes, and you oftentimes don't even notice that it's making mistakes. Even if you are to catch that thing, the many times that it is missed, for the small mistakes that it does make, those become feedback loops of mistakes that get bigger and build up and snowball over time. And so those external facing AI tools, especially like you're saying in local media, they do really become credibility like cracks. The flip side of that use case, though, is for the internal tools, is they allow you to see where your credibility can slip very easily. When you feed your own information into there, and I would say in a more loosey-goosey manner, feed all of your information into there, keep it inside, analyze it, right, from a data analysis perspective, and see where it starts to make those mistakes. Begin to be really like, analytical, fine-tooth comb about the biases that the AI picks up in your own information. And I think that in turn can create better reporting and better publishing. So on the flip side, not on the audience side.
So I haven't told you guys this, but I was a victim yesterday of bad AI usage. I posted on my flight here from New York, I posted on LinkedIn and Facebook about this interim gig that I'm doing here. And Facebook's AI summary talked about this new job and what it entailed, and it said that it was somebody else doing the job, not me. It got me wrong, which is kind of a central fact to that. And it's already been picked up and echoed on Google. So, that it does get things wrong. But one of the questions from the audience is whether AI can help fulfill the promise of personalized news that matters to citizens and democracy. So none of you are called publishers. You are all publishers in a sense. What do you think about that? Do you feel like you're qualified to answer that?
I feel like our information ecosystems are already so siloed that the personalized news, like the internet is already a real choose your own adventure situation where you can find a viewpoint, you can find news that reinforces whatever viewpoint you want. And so I feel like that has happened. I think that AI has supercharged that a little bit because if you listen to Mark Zuckerberg talk, for example, it's like he wants AI-generated content to live alongside human-generated content. He wants people to allow it to happen. And it's like, you can fall into this loop. You can start talking to a chatbot, and that chatbot will tell you anything that you want it to tell you if you give it the correct personality and persona and instructions and things like that. From a news publisher standpoint, I mean, I definitely think that AI delivery tools are going to make sure that your articles are surfaced to the right people if you show up on New York Times' website and you always click on articles about the Los Angeles Lakers, like maybe that will always be on your homepage, and maybe that is a good thing, and I'm sure it will be good for click-through and subscriptions and time on site and things like that. Whether that makes like a meaningful difference in terms of our like overall information ecosystem, I don't think that it will, but I do think that it's like a useful tool for publishers from like a business standpoint.
So there are a number of questions from the audience about the business model, but here's one that's kind of personal. It says, I maybe have a couple of hours on the weekend. What, if anything, can I do from my laptop to help journalists? I subscribe to the Chronicle and the New York Times. Well, I'll put in, you could subscribe to 404 Media. You could do that.
Please do that.
Yeah.
Also, thanks for subscribing to places. You know, you don't always hear about that. I feel like my friends and family, they're not journalists. They don't usually subscribe. And it's a hard, you know, argument to try to convince them. And they always ask me, well, can I get some? When my husband's boss even asked me for a cheaper subscription, I was just like, you can afford it. So if I can't even make that argument, it's hard to make an argument for me. So first of all, thanks for subscribing.
You can subscribe to Mapping Black California's newsletter. It's free.
Yeah, do that too.
Yeah, it's real cheap.
But yeah, read as much as you can. Read outside your echo chamber. You know, search, find out more, and subscribe.
Yeah, my honest answer is word of mouth. Like, tell your friends about us. Tell your friends about publications that you really like. Tell your friends about an article that you really enjoyed reading, or a TikTok that you saw that was, you know, delivered by a journalist and was good. For me personally, like a personal recommendation made to another human being in a group chat or like over email or face-to-face goes so much further than posting something on your Facebook or posting, like, you know, tweeting it or something, which do that too, but I feel like the person-to-person connection has been very meaningful for our publication. Many times people have come up to me and said, I subscribe because my son told me about you, or I subscribe because my cousin is a big fan of yours. And I'm sure that's similar for the Washington Post. I'm sure it's similar for all publications. And I really do feel that focusing on like the interpersonal dynamics of your situation is really the most meaningful thing that you can do versus like posting it on Facebook and walking away.
Yeah, I met the student last week, and we asked, there was a waitress for us at a restaurant, and we asked her, what do you read? And she said Associated Press, and we're like, oh my gosh, can we clone you forever and ever and ever? and we're like, why? And she's like, because of primary sources. And we're like, clone you, please. But be aware of what sources are in what you're reading, if it is primary, if it's not, if it's copied over and over, if it's aggregated, where the information originally came from.
So we were having a conversation earlier this afternoon, and one of the topics that came up, and I had not really given this any thought, is how AI credits its sources. And the point was made that it will look credible because it'll, in a window next to the content, it'll actually cite all of the sources that everything came from. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't cite the original source where all of those other sites got the material from in the first place. And I thought that was a pretty interesting thing, and really a very actionable thing. And it would be really useful to know, well, who started this? Where do I go to the root? But what did you think of that?
I think it's a problem from time immemorial, from like blogging days where, you know, someone will do a big investigation, publish it, and then it gets aggregated with a more sensationalist headline by a tabloid or by a random blog, and then that version of it goes really viral. Like, it'll go to the top of Reddit, it will, you know, win the internet lottery, and that becomes the version that's read. And that's kind of built into the internet at this point, the sort of like some other version of an article goes viral, and as someone who has both aggregated things but also had a lot of my stuff aggregated and seen another version of that article go viral and being shared around, it's like a bittersweet moment because more people are seeing what you're publishing, but very few people are willing to read 2 articles about a subject. Like, very few people are like clicking the link in the like 8th paragraph that comes to us. And so if that can be automated in some way, like if AI can get better at citing its sources, I think that's good. But I also don't know how many people are gonna go to Perplexity or ChatGPT or frankly even Google's like snippets at the top, read the summary and then say, I'm definitely going to click through and read what I just read all over again. So I do think it's a problem, but it's a problem that I think everyone's probably been dealing with to some extent for a long time.
I'm sorry, Alex, did you want to get in?
Yeah, I'll be really brief because I feel like I don't have an actual productive response to that, except to say that I go and I read the sources.
I do
only
too.
because I've been trained to not believe anything that comes out of AI's mouth, because it's racist as hell. But aside from that, I think it's important. I don't know if it should necessarily be prioritized to put the first and main source as the focus of that problem solving. I don't know if that's maybe what we should be solving, but I think maybe the root of the problem, somebody earlier had said we need to be training from like kindergarten how to like read and understand the news. And I think maybe that is where that conversation, like where that topic should go, because people need to have a better understanding of bias. They need to have a better use of skepticism in their lives. And when you get that paragraph from like the Google AI analysis, take that information with a grain of salt. When you see your friend on Facebook or on Instagram post information, when they go like, oh, Katy Perry said X, Y, and Z, you should actually go to like Katy Perry's Instagram or her Twitter and actually read the tweet for yourself. Start there. And then I think it kind of handles the issue of whatever source AI is putting at the top, if people themselves do the digging.
So
I think news literacy is like obviously a massive societal issue, and I think that teaching kids how to read the news and how journalism is done is really important. But I also think when we're talking about technology, journalists are really, really bad at explaining how they do their jobs. Like when I went to journalism school, it was drilled into me, like, you are not the story, view from nowhere, and which means like share both sides of the story. You should not insert yourself into the article in any way. And what that ultimately like leads to is a lot of articles being written, and by a lot I mean almost all of them, being written where unless you already know how journalism works, it's not clear how that information was obtained. Like how did the journalist figure this out? And you know how it works, I know how it works, but what we've tried to do and what people are increasingly doing is explaining, like, we went through thousands of pages of documents. Here are the documents, if you want to look at them, we've uploaded them, go find them. Here are the people we talked to. Here's how we talked to them. Was it a phone call? Was it an email? Was it a chat? Was this person caught on a hot mic at a like panel conversation somewhere? Like, I think that journalists have done a really bad job over the last 10, 15, well, forever, about explaining how they do their work, and then also have been chasing what I believe is like misguided objectivity.
the both sidesism.
Yeah, and there's some outlets it works very well for, but I think that it should be clear sort of how you obtain the information, and not an opinion piece, but like, what do you think about this in some way? Like, what should the reader think about this? At least that's how I approach it.
It's pretty interesting. There's another question from the audience. Feel free to submit your questions. And I think you've all had experience with this. It's a really good question. What kinds of stories does data journalism make possible that would otherwise not be possible?
I don't think that there are any stories that are impossible, and I think data has the potential to enrich every story. And I think that's because people can have a tendency to have a very narrow view of what data is. People look at data and they're like, oh, it's it's numbers. It's the amount of like bananas I picked up at the store, how much money I spent on gas in a month, like that sort of thing. That's what they think about when they think of data. They don't think about kids falling asleep in classes, text on a page, or sort of the things that we previously, because of computing technology for the space that we're in today, weren't able to like quantify. And now, because we can build these networks of information, we can begin to build connections. The kid is falling asleep in class because they have to walk to school because their parents' work schedule doesn't line up. Like, none of that has to do with numbers necessarily, but it's all a function of society. And now we can tell that story using numbers. Like, we can build those connections and we don't have to have hardcore information about that. It's unstructured.
And also, we're able to use much larger data sets and analyze stuff that we couldn't have before. I mean, you've had experience with that.
We also used Esri GIS mapping in finding out at any time what are the 10 hottest cities in the US and how does the city you live in compare. And that would have, and so our engineers worked with Esri's engineers and we put together a system.
Esri is the dominant provider of GIS-based software technology. Thank you. And so your engineers worked with them.
Yes, and then we made a map so you can figure out, how hot is your city compared to the top 10.
What was that a part of? That was on your climate site, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I think the massive amounts of data that you're able to crunch now, the story, I saw a story last night on 404 around how many licenses for Uber drivers and other sort of service workers like that are up for sale and tradable. And it was a massive number. It was like 800,000. Am I remembering that story sort of correctly?
I didn't work on that one, so
I know,
putting me a little on the spot there. But
I know it's not yours.
I think for us, we're just dipping our toe into the data journalism space because none of us are data journalists, number crunchers. And I think that some of the tools that are coming out have made it a lot easier for us to do data visualizations and for us to understand this sort of thing. We file a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests, and often, which is when you ask the federal government or local state government for documents. And often we'll get back hundreds, thousands of pages of documents. And often the hardest part of doing those stories is just scrolling through all of these, all of this data. Sometimes it's a bunch of emails, but sometimes it's a bunch of charts, a bunch of databases, things like that. And I think that there's the qualitative type stories you can do where you're trying to figure out what is the type of data that I'm looking at here? And sometimes that is enough for a story. And what I mean by that is we recently did a story about Palantir, which is this big data crunching company that works with ICE and works with CBP and other federal agencies. And we saw the back end of this Palantir database. And we saw basically that immigration and customs enforcement can search by someone's visa status, by their hair color, by their port of entry, by literally hundreds of different characteristics, whether they have a tattoo, whether they have different types of scars, suspected gang affiliation, things like that. And without us crunching that entire database, we were able to say, these are the types of things that are in this database, and these are the types of searches that you can do. You can do all of these different filtered searches that would lead to some of the outcomes that we've seen in recent days. And so I think that, to your point earlier, it's data can add a level of specificity to people's lived experiences and some context to what is happening. And I'd like to do more of that, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think also from the visual aspect too, it's brought a level of clarity to doing that, especially when you talk about if you want to see neighborhoods change over time, just take a look at some of the top-down maps. You can begin to lay those over each other and do spatial analysis on them, which it really is a gorgeous way to show you land development, environmental impact, right? A lot of the really amazing stuff we're seeing with land cover and impervious surfaces is just they're mapping tree canopy, and that's not necessarily numbers. A lot of it was visual at first. And all of that is beginning to be understood as data, and it's beginning to be understood as spatial data. That imagery is really becoming important, especially in GIS.
So I guess it's to be expected because AI promises to be so transformative, or the companies making it are promising to make it so transformative. But when you talk about all the different ways that you're using data to tell those stories, to analyze trends around income inequities or tree canopy cover or whatever, there are lots of ways that technology is being used to make stories more understandable. But it's all pretty much getting subsumed by the conversation about AI, it seems to me. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with you? I mean, you've offered a lot of examples of how you're using technology to tell stories.
I'd say AI is it depends on who you're talking to, right? It depends on the audience. The average person, if they're engaging with one of those stories, if like our audience members, they're not reading our stories and going, oh, I wonder if AI did this. Not the people who are using our information to do work in their communities. They typically don't care, right? The policymakers typically not asking us if AI did it, right? Because they know, they have trust in us, and that takes it back to that trust conversation. If they know who built it. Speaking with other journalists, yes. Speaking with other data analysts, yes. With other spatial analysts, yes. AI is beginning to overtake that aspect of the work. And some people, I think, might argue that some of the creativity is being lost. But that's kind of the part, I think, in the trend of ingenuity that we're in right now, is we have to do a lot of development in the efficiency part of it. Once the tools have kind of worked like the kinks out of making the business aspect, the revenue aspect, easier, once we've brought them into it and people can feed their kids, then we'll kind of circle back around to having more of the conversations about the creative part again.
So this seems like a fair question at this point. How can I believe anything I see on the internet? Give me a clue.
I've spent hundreds of hours looking at AI-generated video, AI-generated images, so on and so forth. And it used to be pretty easy to tell what was real and what was fake, at least for me. Certainly not for millions of people on Facebook, based on what I've read, the comments I've read, and some pretty alarming, arguments I've seen. But I think it's getting a lot harder to tell. And I think that I still have a decent sense for it, and it almost has nothing to do with what an image looks like or what a video looks like at this point, because they're getting so realistic. For me, it's just, do I trust the person who has shared this? As in, is this an official account of someone who would post something like this? It's a lot of scrolling through, like clicking deeper into their profile and scrolling through and saying like, okay, is this a person who would like reasonably be able to take this video, or are they not in a position where they're filming Leo Messi fighting a crocodile, which I've seen a lot of that on Facebook lately. It's very
popular. That didn't happen?
It didn't happen, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But if it were Messi himself, I would say, okay, maybe this did happen. So I think that you kind of always have to have your guard up at this point, and I feel like that too is very upsetting, because I write a lot about artificial intelligence, as I've mentioned many times, and I once put out a call to my friends on Facebook saying, send me AI-generated images that you've seen on Facebook. I want to see what your algorithms look like show me stuff. And many of my friends sent me images and videos that were real, and they thought that it was AI. And there's this opposite problem where people have their guard up to a level that they don't believe anything anymore. And so it cuts both ways, where you have people making fake stuff, but then you also have people who don't want to believe real devastation, real news, real things, and they just say that it's AI generated. And I think that's a really big problem as well.
I'm really looking forward, when we get there, to asking you the question about what you're optimistic about. There is a question here. It says there's a risk of news channels turning into personalized echo chambers so that we lose common ground. Do you buy that? And do we address that? I'm not sure I buy that. What do you guys think?
I think we're there personally, and I've been there for a long time. I think that, you know, you used to look at there used to be 3 news channels. There used to be a couple major newspapers, and now there's thousands and thousands of different independent blogs, some of them more trustworthy than others, many of them just like outright disinformation. And I think you can look at like an objective fact or an objective event that's happening and read 50 different articles with 50 different perspectives about it. And I think it's like whatever you sort of surround yourself with is what you'll end up believing. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face right now.
But I still think, I believe that there are reporters, there are trusted sources who do create common ground. When Juliet Alperin writes about the environment for the Washington Post, I trust Juliet. And I know that there's a universe of readers who have that in common with me. So I think that atomization piece is all true, but I also do think that because we do all share some trusted sources, that there still is common ground there. That makes sense? Are there AI startups or new services that you actually think are useful, that are helpful in what you're doing?
Yeah, there's one that I actually just learned about a week or so ago. I believe they're currently working out of Chicago right now called Agate AI, and they're building a tool for local media pull out of their news articles specific local information to do sort of some of the sourcing that we were talking about. So like if you write an article about, you know, John's crab hut in Milwaukee, wherever, it'll pull out John, it'll pull out Crab Hut, it'll pull out Milwaukee, and then tell you who John is, when the Crab Hut, all that kind of information. And I feel like, you know, in the work that we do with context setting specifically, so much of data analysis, so much of publishing around data is context setting, because, you know, when we're talking about bad actors, a lot of the personalization part of it is publishing factual information with just enough of a hint of a push in the wrong direction. And the part that we have to be careful about is telling a story that talks about the potential of a community that we're highlighting without telling people this is what you're going to believe and how you're going to believe it, because that's not our job, right? We are supposed to give them the information that reflects the lived experiences. With these kind of tools, allow us to not have to reset context every single time we do a data update. We do a new publication, we go into a new neighborhood or city or county or state or whatever it may be. And so I think the startups that allow for local efficiency, that work on a smaller level, that don't try to even the playing field for the entirety of a population, are really the ones that are going to be the most trustworthy as we move forward.
So we have time for one more question. Thank you for that, Alex. We have time for one more question. And this is because before you told me that you were optimistic about the future. What are you optimistic about?
I'll go first. I am optimistic, despite everything that I just said, because I think that I think a lot of these problems are caused by social media and the incentives of social media and sort of the, you know, engagement problem associated with social media. And I think that people are getting sick of it to some extent and have started relying a lot more on trusted people and their friends and family. So we personally are seeing a lot of growth from group chats, word of mouth. We're using old technologies to reach our readers directly. Like we have an RSS feed that's really big, like really helpful for us growth-wise. Our newsletter, we're seeing a lot of growth there. And we're hearing from people like, we want to come to people who we trust. And I think that there are enough people out there who care about the truth, and these sort of like local networks and sort of the taking back of like it's hard to have a mass scale at this point, but what we are seeing is that there are so many people out there who have very specific interests that are willing to subscribe to us, that are willing to subscribe to the Washington Post, that are willing to subscribe to whatever publication that they want to support, full of people who make journalism that they trust. And I think that like that boom has happened very recently. And
I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it.
yeah. And the tools to do this have gotten so much easier. They're like, we use this product called Ghost. We could not have launched this 5 years ago. It would have taken a designer, a credit card processor integration.
I'm going to pause you there just because we're on time. We can all please take a look at Ghost.
See the clock.
A last thought?
I'm optimistic about the number of tools and how much easier it's gotten to get into AI, to understand it. These are not original thoughts to me, but they're thoughts that I have now made my own original thoughts. Everybody who has access to a computer can now go online and build their own little AI tool in probably about half an hour using another AI tool. And the more people that do that, yes, it feeds into the data mass that is being built up about us, but it also allows us to have a deeper understanding of the thing. And as long as we don't live in fear of it, we'll be able to overcome it.
Awesome. Marian?
I think it's good. All these questions are good. I think it's good to question authenticity. I think that's a good thing to be curious and not just to ingest whatever is out there. So I think that attitude is smart and good. So that's what I would be optimistic about.
Those are terrific. I want to thank all of you for your great thoughts and terrific answers tonight and for traveling to be with us. We appreciate it. It's been a pleasure spending time with you and learned a lot from you. I'm going to turn this over to Mark Etkind.
Yeah, thank you, David, Jason, Marian, and Alex. Wow, what a fantastic panel, and from a personal perspective, what a great way for me to begin my time here. I also want to give a special thanks to everyone behind the scenes who made tonight's event possible: staff, volunteers, production crew, trustees, and of course David for organizing this great panel with Jason, Marian, and Alex. So one more time for this great panel. I also want to thank everybody in the audience, in person and online, for participating and submitting questions. And I'd like to ask you 2 more times to go online. And the first one is to take our survey. Your feedback really helps us shape our future programs. I'm going to tell you the second time to go online in a moment. I also want to invite everyone with AI so central to what we do to come visit the museum. We have a fantastic exhibition called Revolution. It is the 2,000-year history of computers, and it will take you and give you all the background that got us to this moment. And then we have a brand new exhibit, Chatbot Decoded, that dives into AI and gives more information on that. So please come visit the museum. And then, as I mentioned, wanted folks to go online one more time, which is that we rely on donations and the support of people like you. So please scan the QR code, visit computerhistory.org to donate. If you become a supporting member now, we're going to have in May a reception just for supporting members. And in May, that reception is going to be on May 13th for our next CHM live event, Character Building, Bridging Code and Culture through Unicode. So I please hope to see everyone again, and thank you for joining us, and have a great night. Thank you, that was really...